So, moving on with our agenda for tonight, our next order of business was to have a presentation by the Mutual Group, who I invite up to the podium here, and we'll have to kind of settle in a little bit. There's a projection screen, and the intent is to show some images on that. The town board members have in front of them a nicely bound report. I'm not saying that the other pile of reports that you have, which is our responses to the Waterfront Park RFP, are not what I'm talking about. Just the one labeled Mutual Group at the top. Do you have that, Tom, or fish out it?
I gotta fish it out.
All right. Does everybody have their printed report? You gave it to Ann?
Got it.
Okay, you're good. So, just to summarize where we're at, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great to see your team here. Larry Lane has, and the gentleman in the center with the blue jacket has been the one who's been interviewing town employees, department heads, inventorying how we use our existing space, photographing the space, looking at its arrangement in areas for offices, for walking and circulating, for meeting, and for other purposes, and then looking at the basic question of what are we going to do about what we call the old town hall, this side of this building, with respect to its sort of descent into obsolescence, I guess you could say, and bringing the building department, which is off-site, and it's a significant town department, into a consolidated town hall, and fitting in the parking and doing it in a way that is both efficient from a cost perspective, but also really respects the fact that this building is an iconic and important center for our community, and it needs to be good. So that's our basic work, and I have to commend you. I feel like it's an extraordinarily detailed analysis. We're barely going to scrape the surface of it in the next half an hour or so. So the town board members have copies, and when we finish up, we'll talk about next steps.
Great. Thank you,
So
Mr.
welcome.
Supervisor. Really appreciate that, and it's a pleasure to be here. And you hit the nail on the head. This is really the first step of many steps to go forward. We've compiled the data. We have 7 schemes. We have an addendum to the report that we gave you earlier based on some of the comments that were given to us the other day when Larry and Noel met with you all. So we're here. We're going to, some of the slides are the raw data which you have in front of you, which we'll just skip through unless someone has a particular question about some of them. But we'll get into the detail of the few schemes. So with that, I think I'll let Larry jump right in and present to you our findings.
Thank you.
Can everyone hear me without a microphone, or should I bring?
If you hold that in your hand, the people on TV will actually be able to hear you.
Okay.
The YouTube, which will be probably getting thousands of clicks, will actually be audible.
I don't know about that, because I'm going to be talking, but as Mr. Musial said, that we did our analysis and synthesis. It's in 2 different steps. The first part, we're actually gathering the information, and the second part, we bring it all together with some solutions, some conceptual solutions, and some suggestions. Now, what I'm going to show you are those 2 items, and like Mr. Musial said, I'm going to go quickly through the analysis part, but I want to point out a few things. But I need your we all need your feedback and the town's feedback on some of the concepts that we came up with. We came up with 7, and we all have pros and cons. We have pros and cons for each one of them. Some of them we elaborated on more than others, and we will explain why we elaborated on the ones that we had more pros to. Okay, let's continue. Just a quick rundown, as you know about your building. This building was drawn in 1959, so technology has changed an awful lot since this was actually built. And then the building next door we call this building here Building A. The building next door we're calling Building B in this report, and that was drawn in 1992. We are also looking at the site at the Rockland Psychiatric Center, the RPC, and as a candidate of a place to rebuild a new town hall and consolidate with the police department, and we'll talk about pros and cons of all of that. And let's go to the next one. Again, we're fact-finding, and then it goes into the comprehensive design. Move on, please. Okay. So, go ahead. We have 3 different sites we're considering. The one in the middle is where we are today. Like I said, Building A, Building B. We also have the building department with the fire prevention building. That would be Building C and D. And we're considering also the pros and cons of moving all to the RPC site. Move on. Okay. Okay. Let's go take it all over there. Now, the old building has got a lot of structural challenges. The outside has a lot of steel wide flange columns that are now becoming exposed. There's concrete cladded on it as per the original 1959 design. Some of those is spalled off. There's exposure to it, to the elements. There's actually a beam that was pointed out to us during our survey in the building almost below us here that is damaged. They're actually propping it up with wood. So this building really has served you well, but there are some structural challenges. Move on. And the new building next door, 1992, is when it was built. It's designed more in the postmodern era, and it seems to be still in very good shape with many years to come for service. And let's go on. This site here is on 5.3 acres, and we'll talk about the RPC site later on. Let's move on, which is on 27 and plus change acres at the RPC. Parking considerations. On this site today, there are 170 parking spots. Now that includes the parking for the police. We will be bringing in if we were to use this site, we will be bringing in the building department and the fire prevention department along with whatever visitors will be coming with them. So there will be an increase of need, obviously, for more parking spots. And we are coming up with about 215 minimal parking spaces. But in their schemes, we will show you how we're going to achieve that and more. Let's go on. Let's go on. Actually, would you go back in a second? RPC is quite large, and we can actually fit maybe 550 parking spaces, and we'll find that that's one of the pros of that site. Okay, go on. So you'll see this color chart per department throughout the whole system, and that'll give you a quick idea of about where these departments are placed. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Space program, just real quick. This is still the analysis, just so you'll know when you're referring to the booklet. There are 5 different space types, POA, POB, private office, A, B, and a workstation A, B, and C. And each one digresses to a smaller space requiring less square footage. Move on. Okay. So we're going to call this Building A, which is the building we're in, the old town hall. And it looks like this. You can see the color charts in each one. There is an insert of the floor plan in there so you can see it a little bit easier. The names of the spaces and square footages and the colors are all there. On and on. This is the lower and the upper floor. Go ahead. Now this is Building B, same thing. You can see a lot of blue there. That's actually the police department. And there, on this floor, also on the upper floor, there is actually on the bottom right of this plan, there's the town clerk and then part of the judicial system, the courthouse, courtroom. Okay, go ahead. And then this is Building C. They're actually on one half of the library. That's where the building department is, and they're busting at the seams. Let's move on. And there's our plan. Go ahead. This is where the fire prevention is. We're calling it Building D. Okay, looks like that. Let's move on. I just want to point out how to read these charts, and I won't elaborate too much on it, but you'll see the color stripe on the top and the name of the department, and you'll see the individual people on there and their title, the type of workspace that they have. Remember those 5 types that I was pointing out at the beginning, how much square footage there is today and how much we're proposing to have below. Let's go on to an orange one. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep, go, keep going. Let's go to the building department. Okay. Go in another one. Another one. There we go. So this gives you a little quick idea of what's going on in the building department. That was one of the big issues that were brought up to us when we were first interviewing, is how tight they are and how there's busting in the seams. They have a lot of files, a lot of paperwork, a lot of paper files that they have to store. And if you look at the bottom right, and there's the second to the last line, it says 3% circulation. It's best to have 20% or 30%, and we're actually proposing to have about 30% on all the departments. So you can see, based on just 3% to 30, they're just really squeezed in there, and they need a little bit more room. Let's move on. Keep on. Gone. Keep going to the next grouping. Keep going. Okay, go. All right, so this will give a quick rundown of the existing and proposed square footage per department. Okay, let's move on. Let's go back real quick. I want to point out too, the proposed square footage, you see it's about 53,000. So that, half of that is about what building B is, where the police and the town clerk and the courtroom is. Okay, go ahead. So we have different, we have another blocking study talking about the adjacencies. These are proportional to the size of the departments and how they interact with the public and also with themselves. Now, here's the fun part, the synthesis. This is how we bring it all together and come up with 7 different schemes that we can review. Let's move on. Let's move on to this, through this.
And please bear in mind, this is a work in progress. This is by no means the final. We have a lot more work to do and a lot more studies to create. So this is your first look at a work in progress, so you can have the benefit of communicating back to us some thoughts and ideas that you may have.
All right, so this will talk about the same design considerations I think we already discussed. Let's move on. Okay, scheme 1. Scheme 1 is shown to be mainly where the orange dot is. And go with the next one. Next. And if we were to have a promenade, tree-lined, and really accentuate Orangeburg Road as it goes from east to the west towards the town hall. Go ahead, next one. And you see where the orange dot is. It creates somewhat of a backdrop with that promenade, taking out building A, and now we have this whole backdrop. And when I was in a marching band, I actually called that the fanfare formation, because we would actually do that with the queen, with the homecoming queen in the middle. So this would be actually a fanfare type of formation. Move on. So then, go ahead. This is, let's go back. Okay, so we have the existing town hall, and this is showing how it is today. Go ahead. And then if we were to do it in various schemes, different phases, this would be the early phase where the cyan color would be what we would build as a replacement of building A. But building A would stay in there while the people were occupying in it as the first construction is going on. Next. And then at the end result, it would look like this, where the addition would be there, and then we would have a connection to the other part. It splits up like this. Remember those colors we were talking about with the departments? Well, that would be the departments and how proportionally they would be laid out. And there would be a 2-floor layout in this scheme. And there it is in plan, and you can see how the parking actually works out, and where it actually has more like that backdrop that we were just talking about. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And the pros and cons of this. The pros we just talked about, as far as it would actually, you can maintain this site as the existing town hall. People are not going to have to look for the new location. They know where it is today. They'll know where it is in the future if we stayed here. That's what this is talking about. There would be a savings in construction because we are not rebuilding building B, where the police department, town clerk, and also the judge, the courtroom is today. And they can also occupy the existing building B while the phase 1 is going on. Fanfare, we talked about that, and it could be viewed that this site might be a little bit more accessible for emergency vehicles than perhaps comparing it to the RPC site. cons on this is that it would have to be done in various phases. There is less land than the RPC, and there would be some phases, temporary facilities. We also came up with some other ways to get around that. Let's move on. The cost estimate for this scheme 1 would total to $10,234,525. That includes the construction, the site work, and the furniture equipment. But it does not include any temporary facility that might be needed. Move on.
And it doesn't include like architectural design,
That's right.
soft cost type stuff.
It does not include the architecture's design. Now, we're leaning towards a scheme 4, but I'm going to show you, and we do have some idea, give you an idea what that might be for a project such as this.
And bear in mind, of course, this is very early in the process, but we felt it was important to give you some sort of idea. They may vary as we get into it and start adding things like the general conditions, a contingency, and things like that. So this is the first shot.
Okay, next slide. Scheme 2, we did not elaborate a lot, but the virtues of this was that it would be built over here instead of over here. And the reason why it would be built here is that it could be built above the parking here so that we're not taking up very many parking spaces except for the support, and that would actually double as a shelter for the cars there, and these are where the police actually park. Some cons, some very big cons. One main one is that there's an antenna tower right here with the equipment building next to that, and to connect a building here to here would be pretty laborious for the people working there, and it just doesn't work out as well as some of the other schemes we came up with. Let's move on. And I just covered most of these. Let's go to 3. Go ahead. Next. So 3 was to rebuild this in the same location, and I think that we can do much better. So there's some pros and cons of that, but you can look at that, but I think we need to move on to the next one. Scheme 4. Now, Scheme 4 is kind of exciting. It has a lot of virtues in that we are able to build it over here and connect to this building this direction, or also here. And there's also another scheme where we're actually having a pedestrian public entrance from this way where the parking is as well. All the parking in there, and we can come in both ways. Go ahead. Go ahead. So to do something like that, the early phase would be to build this area here. Now, in this area, we've got a generator, we've got a couple of cooling towers. Those do not need to be moved yet while we're doing this. So this can be functioned. The generator services this, and the cooling towers, as I understand, services the building B. And they will eventually need to be relocated, but not in the very first time. It's not going to prohibit actually this work to for this work to begin. Next. And then at the end result, we would have the building here in a 2-story format. And in between there, we're actually proposing to have maybe an atrium to connect that, where the outside wall of this becomes an inside wall of the atrium. Go ahead. And then to split it up to show you how the departments might be blocked out, it could be something such as this. Move on. And then in the plan, it shows how the parking can actually be configured around something like that. Next. And then I just talked about most of these pros and cons. The cons obviously is similar to the phase 1, the scheme 1 that we just talked about, because that's to be done in phases, and the RPC land is larger. Move on. Now, conceptual skill, Mr. Usual?
Well, it's a little bit difficult to see, but basically, this is a many-phase project, regardless of which scheme you do, and the closeout would be in January 2021. That would allow for the various phases to take place, and this schedule, which we'll give you a handout shortly, will shows where we are today, the next meeting, and then the various selections for surveyor, geotechnical, et cetera, environmental. And then when the bidding would take place, the 3 phases of design, a schematic, the design development, construction documents, and a bidding. But the bottom line is This particular schedule takes you out to December of 2020 or January 2021.
All right. The construction cost estimates is slightly more than what we were showing with the Scheme 1, mainly because of a larger atrium and also for some of the interior work that we're doing inside of the Building B. Why don't you talk about the soft costs coming up?
Well, the soft costs, we just simply took the construction cost for the architect's fee and just plugged in 9%. And remember, there's over close to 2 years or slightly more than 2 years of construction that has to take place, and it's 2 years of the first phase being about 18 months, and then the other phases add up to about another year. So that we're showing the architect's fees, the civil engineering fees, the cost of a survey, geotechnical engineering, that basically means the borings, the environmental engineering to write a specification to deal with any environmental issues, the laboratory analysis, taking samples of the various pieces of material, testing and inspections that will be required during the construction process, the permitting costs, and frankly, the permitting costs are probably high, but we put something in because the utility companies still require you, even though you're a municipality, to pay them. So that permitting cost is mainly for the utilities. Reproduction costs and FedEx charges, things like that, legal fees. Bonding costs, we put in $175,000 for your bonding costs, which frankly is probably a little bit high, but you're going to have a bonding attorney, I assume, and a prospectus and all that stuff. So we put in that number, and that's, you know, we might be 150, might be 200, but you know, we figured we'll round it off to 175.
So that's included in the 12,068,000?
No, this is in addition to.
In addition, okay.
Right. And then the miscellaneous advertising. So the total soft costs are $1.5 million in round numbers. And then if you elect to have a construction manager, some people like a construction manager, some people don't. We figured that cost is probably about $450,000, which would give you somebody on the site throughout the construction process. Next one.
Okay. So another scheme we have is Scheme 5. Now, this was talked about early on, and we were asked to look at this, but we looked at it briefly. Scheme 5 is to build on top of the existing Building B. Now, to build what we need, square footage-wise, we would need a 2-floor building to be over this 2-floor building. And structurally, I don't know if it's sound to do that. Also, if we did that, we may have to straddle over this building to support a 2-story building. Circulation, it brings in some challenges, and so we did not explore that very far.
Maintaining occupancy.
Pardon? Yeah, that's right, exactly.
You can't maintain occupancy during construction of the structural steel above, so you'd have to find some place to put those people, which doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. So you would be displacing at least 28,000 square feet. People could stay in the Building A, but Building B would have to be vacated. So let's move on. All right, so we were looking at Scheme 6. 6 would be down in this area. Go next one. In this area here. Go ahead, next one. So the property in the Rockland Psychiatric Center is made up of this property, but this cutout is, I guess, state-owned. So just to give you an idea of how big this property is, there is actually, if you put this box in there, and this box represents roughly the square of this property that this existing town hall is on. This area here is a wetland. You cannot build on it. This area here is also a wetland, cannot build on it. And this then creates a very tight connection. So if we were to have the restricted, limited vehicle access from over here, and then to expand into this area with vehicles, it would be somewhat of a little bit of a bottleneck to get into that area and a long walk to get back unless this is purchased. And I do not, if you were to use this site, I don't know that we really need this for actual parking, because we can have quite a bit more parking in here than in this site. Okay, and we could have access from the Orangeburg Road here, but this area is low, but this area is high. In order to have that, then this county road would have to probably give permission to have curb cuts coming in, maybe an off-ramp, and then a ramp to get up to the higher elevation in this area. This area, this hatched area, is to show approximately 6.3 acres. And then this area here is to indicate what it would look like to have a new town hall with a police station similar to what we were just looking at on the scheme 4, just to kind of give you an idea of how it might fit. Okay, next. And I think I may have talked about most of the pros and cons on this. The main con, and there's also the con in my view, is that it is not really, it's not currently seen to be the center of the town. Maybe it could be if it was pushed out there, but there would be some effort in order to relocate all of it. There's also the additional expense of moving the police department and the town clerk and the courtroom to the new site, and where we do have a perfectly good building to use now. Next. To do something like that, this is the estimated construction cost. This is because of both buildings or both areas being needed to build. Site work is quite a bit more because there's quite a bit more land to use for parking and for landscaping, and furniture equipment is about the same as you'll see on the other ones, because we're assuming on this example that we would relocate the furniture that is in the building B. Okay, let's move on.
Got a quick question. Do you guys, if we did, not saying we're gonna do it, but do you guys have a value on this land if we did relocate, how much we could recapture with the sale of this property?
That has been discussed, and I think that I'll have to shift that over to the supervisor.
We haven't had it appraised, but I've asked our staff appraiser to, for mixed use. Well, yeah.
And second question, your numbers and all the hypotheticals and examples, does that include demolition and an abatement cost?
It does not include abatement, but it does include the demolition.
We're going to refine the numbers to give you a little bit better breakdown after you decide which scheme or which couple schemes you want. Then we'll refine the numbers and give you a better breakdown of all of it is. But yes.
In your experience, how much, could you even give us an estimate? Because like on example 2, I'm already up to like 14 million. And then I'm just trying to, numbers mean a lot to
Yeah,
the
of
people
course.
that live in this town. And most of these examples are up to $14 million already
Right.
without abatement,
Right.
which is, And the other question is, I advised the supervisor, I wanted to know what the cost would be to fix the existing problems that are at Town Hall and get a number for that, instead of doing any construction. What is it gonna cost to just fix the existing problems, so we could have a comparison as opposed to redoing everything? How much is it gonna cost just to do with the structural issues and issues that we need to deal with right now?
Right, and we intend to provide those costs. It's going to take a little bit of analysis, but I don't have that off the top of my head, but it's our intention
All right,
to
perfect.
give that to you so you can see exactly what's involved. One of the things that would be involved, that would be a concern, would be the removal of some of the environmental, the asbestos, because
Yep.
if
know
you
what to tell
have
me?
something, the floor tile's the easiest to remove. That's really nothing in terms of dollars and cents, but it's something. It's some of the other things that you might get into that are a little bit more costly.
No, we know, because
And
that's one of the big costs over at
Right.
RPC with those buildings is the,
Is the asbestos
abatement.
removal, yeah,
And-
yeah.
and-
And frankly, that's why our estimate for the environmental services was so high, because they have to take samples, you have to have the laboratory analysis, then you have to have somebody monitor the air, you know, during the process. So there's a lot that's involved in it.
Nope.
But we intend to give you those numbers. As a matter of fact, the three of us were talking with our engineer earlier today about doing an energy analysis as well, you know, see what it is presently and what it could be in the future, and compare that to modern construction and see what that may be, or what it would take to upgrade it here to modern. Because one of the things that we were also discussing, and we're evaluating the cost now for any of these new additions, you know, it's always a balancing act between the initial costs and the operating costs. And we're finishing our, I guess, 6th or 7th geothermal job. So one of the things we wanted to investigate was, what if we did the heating and cooling for your, if you did elect to go to an addition, or frankly, even this building, for a geothermal system, maybe under the parking lot, maybe off to the side, but it's something that I think you should consider.
And finally, we have a seventh scheme. This one here is a derivative of the scheme 4. And what is different about it is the footprint in the addition is shifted up a bit for the ground floor and the second floor. And then there's another level below it. So there's 3 levels in this scheme instead of 2. And with it shifted up, what it does is it creates, again, the backdrop that we are trying to accomplish with the scheme 4. So we have a best of both worlds of scheme, I'm sorry, with scheme 1. So we have the best of both worlds of scheme 1 and 4 having the backdrop, and with it having 3 stories instead of 2, the footprint is less. Therefore, we can have a little bit more flexibility of what we do with the parking and the landscaping in that area. It also allows for the entrance to be here, atrium here, and it also allows for this area here to be the room of which would be replacing this room, the boardroom, where it would be accessible to the public easily. It could become, and then it could be a public entrance in this area coming in from here, that direction. So from the parking lot on the west side to come in, from the parking lot from the south side, and from the north side coming in. So there's a lot of accessibility into that. The basement can actually travel underneath this atrium area, and could be a little bit more efficient in square footage, which also can translate to less construction cost. Okay, move on. So the appendix, I'm not going to go through any of this really, but just so you have it, it's an inventory. This is something that we will use if we are asked to continue in the schematic design and design development, just to kind of back reference of what was in each one of the rooms per room number, so that we can get a better idea, not just photographs, but also this actually documents that too. And then we also have a organizational chart for the police that was helpful for us to understand more of how things stack together, and would particularly be. So the next steps would be, we need your input. We need to learn a little bit about some of your concerns. We've heard a little bit of them. We'd like to hear a little bit more. And then we would like to incorporate that into what you just saw in a more narrowed down focus. And then we can refine also the construction costs.
So all this information in the final document that we give you at the end of this process, we will have all this information for you to dwell through.
Let me just to clarify kind of next steps and process. I know that we're going to have questions now, and that's what we're here to do. But it's not going to end here.
Right.
And as soon as we go home, we'll have other questions. You'll have thoughts
Right.
about comments. And so we need a process to move from step to step. One of the things that we talked about the other day when you came and met with me and a few others was to set up a community time when we could really do that Q&A. The town board would be there, other members,
Right.
and we could just ask and kind of get into the weeds a little more. So that was one thing. But initially, after this, I think we need to start collecting comments and responses, and I'll have Vicki in my office, who's done a great job coordinating, basically start assembling. The town board members can email, what about this, what about that, have them fill this blank in, and we'll start kind of putting together a list of thoughts and suggestions and questions. I imagine, we're going to get to a point where the town board is going to have a consensus as scheme 1, scheme 4, scheme 6, whichever it is. We need to make some kind of choice. And then, then my question is sort of where does it go from there? You're then going to kind of lay on kind of new layers of conceptual analysis or schematics, some elevation, some other kinds of information that we
Yes,
can use to
yes.
refine a concept.
It would be our intention to give you some concepts of what it may look like, to also start placing furniture, make it look like a real building so you can see how people are going to function within that space.
And we need to get into that space, because even if tonight, we said, this is a footprint that makes sense, the arrangement of the departments within this space
Yes,
makes a
right.
huge difference. And that's really going to be the subject of a good amount of discussion
Exactly.
among town board members, town staff, the community, sort of the organization of the space. So basically what we're talking about process-wise is we'll collect a bunch of comments and questions tonight. We'll get them back to you. We'll go back and forth kind of on paper and email.
Right.
Then we're going to have another public session where we can review that and layer on some more information. Then eventually we're going to come back to the town board to potentially prioritize which concept seems the most viable.
Yeah.
And then there'll be further elaboration of that concept so we can see in a more detailed way what kind of choices need to go into that.
Exactly, and I think that if you're going to have a informal public meeting where the public can speak and comment, we probably, we can do a PowerPoint presentation, probably a shorter PowerPoint presentation, but we may also want to do it on 24 by 36-inch boards, spread around the room so that people could look at it and digest
Right,
it
they
and
can take
understand
time
a
to
little
go
bit
from
more.
station to
Right.
station and
But-
write down questions on little cards or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think
exactly.
before you do that, though, we really need to get the abatement costs, and we need to get option number 7, which is doing the repairs and how much that's going to cost and
Right.
what the
That would-
extent.
That would be option 8,
Because-
right.
Unlike the supervisor, I haven't come to the foregone conclusion that I'm willing to spend $15, $16 million on a new town hall right now. I think, again, the taxpayers are going to say, that's $16 million. What are the other options? And the other option would be to look at what we can do to salvage what we have right now.
That's exactly right, and we will present that to you. That's not an issue.
I hear that, but I think we need that before we can have a public hearing
Okay.
with people in the
Give us a
community.
week to 10 days, and probably 10 days
Because there's a lot of
to
seniors in
get
this
that
town,
done.
they're gonna see $16 million, $15 million,
Right,
and it's gonna be difficult for them.
right.
Just a quick question. I know that in the beginning, we talked about possibly needing the same amount of space, more space, or less space. In all these concepts that we saw tonight, is it going to be roughly the same size building as this? Is it going to be larger, smaller?
It will be about the same size as Building B. The addition will be about the same size as what is there now. And the reason is because not only are we bringing in the square footage from the DOB and from the fire prevention, but we're also upgrading it for handicap requirements and dimensions that this building doesn't provide anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Can you clarify, what is the acreage on this building, this lot right here?
Well, this building itself,
Oh,
was-
and the surrounding, the whole property,
Parcel is what? 5.5
what's the
acres?
size?
acreage.
Acreage, it was 5 point, what was it? Let's go to the very
5.3, I
top.
think.
Acres.
5.9.
5.3? It's one of the, about the sixth
And was
slide
Aaron
from the top.
coming into this building too? All right. And if we're bringing the building department, do we have an idea on what we would be getting for that building?
In terms of the
Sale or
right,
rental?
potential revenues from
Those are all things that have to be calculated in this equation.
just on the building department question, that's going to take some real thought, because the town owns the building, the library occupies half of it. The town, you know, that site has the museum, Bobby Wise shop. So it's not as clear to me anyway at this point that it's how we can kind of cash in that chip to help pay for other things. I really have an open question as to what is going to happen to the space the building department's in if they were to
Completely agreed.
leave.
Completely agreed, but we
It's not clear, and that requires some real.
don't disagree with you, but it's a factor in this equation that has to be calculated. So
I
that
mean, one thing that I think
everyone
we
in
should
town
say
and
right on-
everyone on this board is completely aware of every factor that's in this equation.
One factor which I think we should rule out is that moving out of there isn't necessarily a welcome mat to the Orangeburg Library to double in size. The town funds that library, and that's, you know, that's not the direction I think we want to go. So
Again,
so
it's a
they're gonna
factor to
there,
be
there's gonna
considered
be
when
empty
looking at the
space,
equation.
And how can we use that to generate some revenues is the question.
I mean, who said we're selling, but it's a factor in the equation. Is there,
sell,
is a
lease,
potential rental, like,
rent.
what are you gonna do with that? You're not gonna just leave it
Will
vacant,
we
so
have to renovate it in order to rent
it's,
it?
it's
Yeah.
just a factor. Well, we don't have to renovate it. Someone can come in and offer us $5,000, and usually when you're going into a rental, you're gonna pay for the build-out. So it's a factor in the equation that has to be considered by the town board and the residents of this town.
I agree, and that's a naughty one.
Yes, this building is on a 5.3 acre lot. The RPC is a 27.5. About 7.6 of it is considered to be a potential area for the town hall, excluding the wetlands and the area that chokes off.
And as far as, you know, I mean, you noted that there's a substantially higher cost to go to off-site because of moving the police department.
Yes, it did.
Of course, that
Yes,
could
you're right.
potentially be offset by the sale of this property, and that revenue would in turn be kind of reverse offset. I think anyway, the town would want to look at buying Staff Court because the shape of that parcel is a little odd
Yes, sir.
without taking ownership. So there's a fair amount to sort out with ultimately, you know, these questions of the off-site locations. And I think I hear your recommendation as an expert is you're fairly skeptical of the idea of moving from
Yes,
what
I
is
am.
really
Yes,
kind of a great
Supervisor, I am.
location from Town Hall.
Well, I think
So we
Vicky,
need to kind of
Vicky
crunch
answered
those
the
numbers.
question, because she said, Vicky, $300,000 per acre?
Brian said between 2 and 300,000,
So you-
depending on the.
Right.
At the max, it would be 2 million. It wouldn't be worth moving down to the RPC
It
property.
does not provide enough of an
It would
offset.
still be coming in like $6 million higher. So to me, I mean, that solves that equation right
I
there.
agree with you.
I have to
We
agree.
are in
I think that
agreement.
it's a great start. Thank you for the presentation, but I agree with Tom.
Excellent job, guys.
Thank you.
I think, I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot to be done, and I think admittedly by you as well, there's a lot to be done before any decisions are made to do anything.
I agree with Tom in terms of, we have to do due diligence in terms of what can be done with this building. My guess is knock it down. You know, that's mine. I don't see,
But we want to see that
But I
demonstrated.
just-
I'm
Listen.
just saying, that in terms of, I've been here for 18 years, and different things have happened in that time. We had one of the steel beams bend on the side of the building, and almost busted a gas pipe. You have downstairs where the IT is down there, and the town attorneys. Some people don't care about the poor town attorneys, but someday they may decide to sue us. You know, in terms of the mold down there, and it's, I don't trust that you could put 2 stories on this building, you know, and build above this building. I think the better way to go is to knock it down. I think it should have been done back in 1992. I think that was a big mistake that was done by the administration at that time, you know. So, again, I think it's worth looking at.
I think you need to look at it.
I'm not disagreeing with it, Tom, but I wouldn't go crazy over that.
So we said that in the very beginning, you know, we need to see the renovation cost.
Yeah.
It's just a part of it. I agree with that completely. So why don't we plan to get some answers back on some of those fundamentals, you know, the abatement cost, the renovation cost. Those are the main things. And then, you know, set a time for further discussion. And in the meantime, the town board will review the matter in
Good.
detail.
Good, yes.
People who are here tonight, are welcome to take a copy of this and put a bunch of stickums on it with questions. We'll get that commentary flowing and get to a point where we have a sort of a sense of what shape the final solution is going to look like.
All right.
So thanks once
Thank
again.
you.
I think you've done great work.
Thank you. It's a good
Thank you.
beginning.